to that person. Certainly any Roman audience hearing Saturnia is going to know daughter of Saturn, hence Juno. Modern audience doesn't know that so much, maybe. So does the translator translate and keep it as is? Does the translator translate Juno? Does the translator translate more expansively, daughter of Saturn, three words for one, expand the concept? Same thing for all the patronymics. In fact, I think patronymics would be a good place to start that conversation. And then that goes into idiom as well. You know. Okay.
That's why this thing's so thick. So many footnotes and stuff.
That's right. So that's one way to do it. You could just do Saturnia, footnote, a dummy, this means Juno.
Yeah, but you only need to do it once.
What?
Twice. Especially like
Well, I mean, with the Trojan and Greek names, they both start with these.
The question, though, that Rachel asked was, is this a translation? I mean, that's what you asked. Is the translator really translating? If they replace it or do something different, bearing in mind their audience. So the 21st century translator who says, I know I'm writing for an audience not steeped in Greco-Roman mythology, rather than do footnotes, I'm going to incorporate stuff into the text. Is that a translation? What is a translation?
Well, I mean, I think that's a translation completely. You could do another thing with the 20th century audience, like, oh, they want to understand what the swords are, let's just have a big gunfight instead.
How far can you go?
Translation.
How far can you go? Now, I think anybody would agree, daughter of Saturn, Saturnia, that's good enough. What if you said, you know what, we're just going to use a whole other name. Call her, call her Jennifer.
I think it's like an adaptation.
Okay, an adaptation. I'm looking for a book. You've seen, I'm sure, Shakespeare, either you've seen live, taped live performance, or an actual movie. Various Shakespearean plays done different ways. I'm imagining you have different versions of Romeo and Juliet.
Isn't there like young Shakespeare or something?
I don't know. There is an excellent Hamlet, a really good Hamlet, which is very, very, very hard to find. I've seen it on Ovation channel periodically, and it's set in, there's a modern day, it's very urban, it's a business, it's a corporation called Denmark. A lot of name actors in it. I think Ethan Hawke is in it. Bill Murray plays Polonius. So you can do Shakespeare in lots of different ways. This book, have we referenced this book before in here?
Yes.
Okay. Douglas Hofstadter's Les Tombeaux de Moreau. It's a 28-line poem, a little 28 or 24-line poem, and 28 lines. This entire book is nothing but translations of this one little poem and commentary on it. There's a whole book of translations. You remember the poem by Horace from last year where he's talking to the girl Pyrrha, and he says, hey Pyrrha, who's the guy now, who's the boy now, who's all drenched in his daddy's cologne and all that kind of stuff. There's a book of nothing but translations of the Pyrrha Ode, because that ode has been translated so many times. We've talked about it. When do you put in a definite article? When do you not? And he saw woman, and he saw a woman, and he saw the woman. Latin has no way to distinguish which is which, and so you got to put that in. It's a good question. I don't know that there's an answer to it. Obviously, different translators have different theories about it. I think obviously as readers, You know, probably at this point, you all have probably started to gravitate to one or two of these if you get the chance. You'll always go to your one or two favorites. You like what you like. You mentioned you didn't like Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald has been a classic translation for years. He translated the Iliad and the Odyssey as well, and clearly not to everybody's taste. You don't care for him. I used to use that as the standard translation in here until I got sick of it. So I don't like this. Doesn't work. So I don't know. You know, it's a wonderful question. I've argued for years. I don't know how to translate. I don't know how to do this. What you guys were saying when you walked in the room was actually right.
It's awful. We were just trying to get you going.
Well, I realize that, but you weren't far off the mark.
Oh, come on. Stop it.
It's a wonderful intellectual game, because here's the thing of it. You can't translate it all. Even if you translate literally. I guarantee you haven't translated the meter. I guarantee you haven't done it in Dactylic Examiner. Now, all attempts that, but even still, it's an accentual, and Virgil didn't write in an accentual meter. He wrote in a quantitative meter. Now, there was a guy named Richard Stanyhurst, 2 or 3 centuries back, who translated the Aeneid into English quantitative meter. English doesn't do quantitative meter, the long and short as opposed to accent. English doesn't do it. Yet Stanyhurst tried. He created some scheme, and I mean, obviously the A in Stanyhurst should be long because followed by 2 consonants. And everybody since then has I don't think I've ever seen any piece of work so roundly condemned as Stanyhurst's translation of the Aeneid. For centuries, it has now just been the thing you hold up as that which is god awful.
Can we read something like, okay, just like the first couple lines?
I'm looking for.
I see.
The guy who did it in rhyming couplets.
I don't have this here. I've got it at home. I gotta tell you, that's the absolute kicker about having your life in too many places. I'm looking for a book called Virgil in English. Here's Ovid in English. And here's the other thing. I get really disturbed when I can't find something like that. Because I always expect to be able to lay hands on any book at any time. And then when I can't, then I get worried that I've misplaced it. Which I may have.
You could just look it up online.
Well, that's not the same.
It's better.
Wow.
Please. Please.
What
I must have it. I must have it.
Dang.
Oh, well, it's a Penguin book called Virgil in English. And it's a whole collection, at any rate, it's a whole collection of Virgilian translations. And the one by Stanyhurst they got some snippets of Stanyhurst in it. Anyhow, it's horrible. You can't read it. It's absolutely terrible. So the guy managed to try to translate the meter. What do you think it is?
Sorry.
I may be in my head, but wait.
Is that it?
No, that's the Dryden. Aeneid.
Take 5 seconds on Google.
No.
Please, please.
Why not?
Well, you look it up if you want to look it up on Google.
Get the computer right there.
I don't want to use it.
Nah. I'll get it. Am I allowed to use my smartphone?
I don't care. But
I
I
don't
would rather not
care.
look it up. I would rather go without and see if I've got the book at home and bring it in. Wait a minute. Rats, no.
Hold on. There's a waste half the class.
So maybe that's
Danielle.
John, be quiet.
Waste half the class and we'll put this now.
Sean, be quiet.
What did you give this?
5 seconds on Google.
It really shouldn't do.
I don't know if it wasn't what I was saying.
You can look up Richard Stanyhurst and Aeneid. You lied. You lied.
Trying to learn.
Is it really that important that every time I leave the chair you find it and you sit down? The problem I've got is, it's at home, I'm not sure what to do.
Sit yourself in this chair.
It has to be. Hey, right, it, the point is, why are we trying to find a horrible translation?
Hey, no, because it's funny.
What's that? Okay. So, you know.
Oh, I found it.
Okay.
First line.
Oh.
To the right honorable. What?
That's the dedication.
Okay, let's get back. Whoa, you cut it off. Just kidding. This is literally just a dedication that's horrible.
That's all you found is the dedication.
Hey, you wait.
Do any of you student helpers have a smartphone back there?
Yeah, I do.
Look up the Standinghurst translation of the Aeneid. The name is right there.
Standinghurst
Aeneid.
translation of
Look
the
it up,
Aeneid.
find a text.
I
Okay.
hate this.
All right, put it away. That's what student helpers are for. That's what student helpers are for.
Yeah, we get to use our technology.
So, you know, what you
Chill,
do.
man.
Then, in fact, I know I picked the Dryden, but for years the Dryden, and this is just a nice addition to the Dryden, was,
That's awesome.
snubs. Actually, this one, I've got it at a used bookstore for $15. But I mean, it is a nice addition. Is rhyming couplets. Now, when he translated in the 17th century, that was the thing to do. Rhyming iambic pentameter. It could be argued that that is a fine way to translate the Aeneid because Virgil used what was the thing to do of his time, dactylic hexameter. So in a way, Dryden has translated it metrically because he translated into the common meter of his day, which is what Virgil did.
Would we be like?
Standinghurst, while maintaining the dactylic hexameter, at the same time did not do what Virgil did. Because Virgil didn't write in something that was god-awful to his audience's ears. Yeah.
How many copies of the Aeneid do you have?
Most of them are all here. Oh, they're all here, I think. Well, you know, you can count them up over there. There's a bunch, they're all over there, and in your hands, and then this came from over there. I don't think, we got more Homer over here than Virgil. I don't think there's any other Virgil over here. Yeah, there's a Humphreys, another Dryden yet, a Lind. Oh, we've got Lind. I don't think anybody's got Lind. We should probably pull Lind out and put him over there. So, you know.
Wait, could you read some of the rhyming couplets?
What are you trying to kill time or?
No, I just want to hear the first couple lines. I just want to hear the like I sing of a.
Well,
You know what?
I actually had taken this home and shared it with our daughter who's 7 last night. Well, last year when she turned 7, her birthday, there's a little known poem by Alexander Pope. Its title is Upon a Girl of 7 Years Old. And it's a beautiful little poem about this little girl who's age 7. And he compares her with Venus and Minerva and so forth. This is a beautiful little thing. He says, he ends it with, I imagine, how she looked then when she was 7 years old, talking about the goddesses. So, had a one-shot opportunity, right? So Olivia's turned 7 only once. So her birthday book last year was the story of a little girl growing up in the time of Alexander Pope, who was 7 years old, had a precocious poetic talent, as Pope did. And Pope is inspired by her to write the poem Upon a Girl 7 Years Old. In the course of the story, the little girl, whose name is Polly Spencer, gets a copy of Dryden's Aeneid for Christmas. So we just read that passage the night before for bedtime story. And so then I took this home last night to show her, saying, this is Dryden's Aeneid, this is what we're talking about. So the beginning. Arms in the man I sing, who forced by fate and haughty Juno's unrelenting hate. Expelled and exiled left the Trojan shore, long labors, both by sea and land he bore. And in the doubtful war, before he won the Latian realm and built the destined town, his banished gods restored to rights divine and settled sure succession in his line, from whence the race of Alban fathers come, and the long glories of majestic Rome. O Muse, the causes and the crimes relate, what goddess was provoked, and whence her hate? For what offense the Queen of Heaven began to persecute so brave, so just a man? Involved his anxious life in endless cares, exposed to wants, and hurried into wars. Can heavenly minds such high resentment show, or exercise their spite in human woe? It's a good poem. It's good. Now, then the question becomes, is it the Aeneid? When Pope translated the Iliad, I feel like it was Johnson who made the criticism. He said, it's a very nice poem, Mr. Pope, but you can't call it Homer.
It's the first 4 books, right?
Yeah, I don't even know he may not have even done the whole thing. Yeah, Caleb?
Just to, do you recall there was one of the poets, one of my favorite poets, I can't remember which one, wrote a poem on the Dionysius of Homer, and I can't remember which.
Are you thinking about first looking into Chapman's Homer by John Keats? Much of I traveled in the realms of yes, it's John Keats. In fact, it was based on his poem on first looking into Chapman's Homer was based on. I'm gonna hit you with this here, but I'm this one. Oh, right here. Here's Chapman's Homer. Here's Chapman's Homer right here. Chapman's version of the Iliad, and that's the version that John Keats knew, and it's actually the version the Pope knew, and is in fact, it's done into 14ers, I think. Is it rhyming 14ers? It's 14ers for sure. Is the lines rhyming? Does it look like?
Yes.
Okay. 14ers are basically ballad stanzas that is written out in 2 lines. So, you know, what do you think? You asked the question an hour ago when I first got off on this. Okay. I don't know, what?
I think it's a different, I think it is a translation, but it's translated from.
So Saturnia I could translate as Saturnia, daughter of Juno, or daughter of Saturn, or Juno.
They all mean the same thing.
We'd be agreed that I could have 3 options, A, B, and C, multiple choice.
Yes.
Would we say that that's all I've got? Is there anything else I could do to translate the word
What's
Saturnia?
Diana, right?
No.
Well, you can also do wife of Jupiter and all that.
Hera.
No.
Hera.
No.
It's the same person.
Okay. Could I do Hera?
Yes.
No.
Why no?
That's Uranus.
Because it's a different language.
It's different language, different culture.
You change all the names of the Greek ones and
Now that seems
No.
that to me definitely feels wrong to do Greek. Could I say wife of Jupiter?
No.
It's not inaccurate,
There's no reference to Jupiter.
but there's absolutely no reference to Jupiter in the name Saturnia.
It could be Demeter as well, right?
We're right. So the question goes, how far can you go? We read the Lombardo translation of all 3 Greco-Roman epics for reading the War on Poverty. He goes pretty far sometimes. He definitely uses some very modern sounding idiom. Sounds a little rough around the edge, sounds a little colloquial at times. How far can you go? Yeah.
I think, if you're like super.
Well, there you go, and you're nodding your head. I mean, that is the argument for why anybody, at least literarily, wants to learn that language.
No, it's also good Slav. It's not.
Well, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if you read, if all you read was fables, can you say you have read the Aeneid? Can you say you've read Virgil?
No,
Is
you've
that
not read
the
Virgil.
same question, or are those 2 different questions?
2 different
Or
questions.
have you read fables?
I've read Fables of the Aeneid, but not Virgil.
No, you haven't read the Aeneid.
I definitely say you've read Fagles, you've not read Virgil. The question is, have you read the
Well, if you haven't read
I think maybe.
Oh! Well, now there's the bumper sticker statement. If you haven't read Virgil, then you haven't read the Aeneid. I think that's absolutely right. I think that's right. If you haven't read Homer, you haven't read the Iliad. So in that regard, I'll certainly say I've never read the Iliad or the Odyssey, either one. I've read lots of translations of them, and I've poked around a little bit in the Greek, but I haven't said and done either one of them. Yeah, John?
When it comes to the names, like especially the way Virgil does it with how interchangeable so many different things are, you have some leeway with with it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, you should be going too far off base, because like, if you're gonna be reading something like if you're gonna be reading an epic poem, you don't know it's just messing stuff around so that someone doesn't tell you understands it anymore.
Well, there you go. Now, I kind of want to push on that phrase. You have no business messing around with it. Why not? I agree with you, but why not?
Well, just for the sake of this is like something like this. I kind of like it on these. I skimmed through the Aeneid a couple times before,
Mm-hmm.
and the Odyssey once. And I like kind of stuff like this, and I understand stuff. But you really should listen to that kind of something someone mustn't tell you. So you should be tailoring a translation to those people.
Does a translator have any obligation to the original author?
Unless he says so.
You're immediately nodding yes.
Because I mean, if you're translating, aren't you like taking their work and like you have to show respect to their work?
I mean,
I think so.
It depends. Like, are you actually like going for like a translation, or are you like going for like a little spin off of it or something?
Now, there are children's versions.
Yeah.
For example, there's at least two children's versions of the Iliad and the Odyssey I know. There's one version of the Aeneid, I'm not sure if it's in print. That's what I wrote for Austin last year for his birthday, is a children's version of the Aeneid. So, you would never call those translations though.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, you would.
They're adaptations.
They're adaptations, right.
And you
It's
probably
adapted.
didn't look at did you look at the original text, or did you like condense it from English?
I was doing both, I'll be honest, because partly it was in terms of time. For me, I mean, I had to get it done in a certain amount of time. And so I was going off of English with the Latin there, because there were certainly times when I wanted to look at the Latin. Some pieces I actually translated literally, some I didn't. It just, of course, then I had some other objectives in storytelling too. And so no one would pretend that any children's version, like the fables and the King Arthur stories, there's a lot of children's versions of these. They're not translations. It's an interesting question. Yeah.
So I don't mean to go back on myself, but like as far as like learning the language, sometimes like I took French and something when I was little, so it's kind of like it's a different sort of thing instead of like when you're older, it's kind of like a rapid translation in your head.
Right.
So it's like your basis is still English, but it's like, oh, this word is like this word.
Well, there's the thing. Now, people who are say, fluent in a spoken language, are you, or any of you, who, I don't think, who else would consider themselves fluent in another language? Yes, what? Spanish, French? Are you, now, was Spanish your native language, though?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you thinking in French yet or not?
I mean, sometimes.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. What about English for you? Are you thinking in English, or do you sometimes translate from Spanish to English incredibly rapidly,
No.
but you are initially thinking in Spanish? Not really? Okay.
No, I mean, like, I don't know. I don't, like, just the different environment, I guess. Like, here,
Well, when did you learn your English?
Like, when I was, like, 7.
Okay, so that's pretty good.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think I've always thought in French when I was in French class, or like when we went to France, I was thinking in French and whatnot, or like outside of French.
Hofstadter, who knows multiple languages, will say, although I think a number of you may have learned a little bit later in life, like you guys, which really, high school is later in life for learning a language, really. He will mention there are times when it really is just super fast translation in his head. It almost seems as if it's completely thought and fluent. In actual fact, it's a super fast translation. Now, I think if you started early enough, that it is genuine, you know, you're thinking in it. Yeah.
I've talked to my him since I've thought about this before, and it's kind of bothering me. But I've had friends who, Adrian, whose his last name's in IV.
Oh, not Adrian Green.
No,
Okay.
Adrian.
Oh, okay. Then-
But I was talking about him. He his first language is French,
Mhm.
and he'll think in French when he's like alone around his family or talking to people.
Mhm.
But or he'll like think in French, but
Mhm.
as soon as he's around people at school, he'll like a lot of it's all in English because he learned English so young,
Mhm.
or mostly. And then my friend who learned Latvian as that was her
Mhm.
first language. Now she'll speak like she is fluent in both Latvian and English, but it just depends on if she's around family or not.
And like you say, context, who you're around, environment, and again, I think the time in which you started it.
And even sometimes the same way, they'll even switch back and forth between each, and like how sometimes you write and you're writing halfway in print and half in cursive, how it'll just
Right.
flip up and like she'll get half words in another language and half English, and
Right.
it's all just, it's still thoughts, and she never really has to think about
Yeah.
It's just like,
what it is, it's just thoughts.
Like you were really, it's not like, like a,
You're not conscious of it.
yeah, you're not conscious of it.
I would bet that you have sometimes made mistakes where you've actually
Oh,
written
definitely.
in the other language or spoken in the language than you meant to be in
Yeah.
one and were in the other.
Like one time, I remember I was talking to my mom on the phone, and it was like with friends around, and then I hang up, and it's like, and I start talking in Spanish to my friend, and I'm like, wait, what? No, I'm not talking in Spanish. And it's like, sorry, and then like, erase whatever I said.
Do you and your wife speak Latin together?
Well, you
Mi
know.
amore.
Some, not so, certainly not so much anymore, now that Austin knows some Latin. It used to be great for, talking around the kids so they don't know what you're talking about. That's not so
Austin knows some Latin.
feasible. So does Olivia, but
No, here's an idea. Why don't you raise them on Latin?
that's what I wondered. Now, she said no to that.
No, that is so.
I wanted to have to go to school and have a Latin
You
teacher
got the whole
as their English as a second language teacher. I thought that would be great, and she said no.
At state, every year you would sweep.
Oh, yeah.
Please tell me they'll be coming here.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. No, I was reading print the other day. Austin was reading, I was reading in the car, and he came across the word donor, D-O-N-O-R, and at first wasn't sure what it meant. And my wife asked him, said, well, what's it come from? And he thought for a minute, and he busted out with dono, donare, donali, donatum to give. And I'm like, my boy! I was like, yeah. So that was good, yes.
Well, two things, like, I was thinking about what you were saying, because when I was younger, when my sister and I were younger, our first language was actually Italian.
Oh, wow.
But then we, had English and French, going to St. Richard's, and that, so it was
Mhm.
my parents dropped Italian, because, we were, a mess.
Mm.
Because it was, French, English, Italian, it's I don't know what my child's saying anymore. So, my parents dropped Italian, so, I used to, when I think about it, it's oh, I used to think like that, but now I have no idea. What it is
Well,
anymore.
and I do think Marcus's question yesterday was absolutely brilliant, and I was hoping he was here today, because I shared it with my wife, and she said, did you encourage him to pursue that as a piece of research? Certain languages say things in certain ways, and how does, anybody who does IB, if you do TOK, in the language, thought, and perception unit, we talk about, which one influences the other. Does language influence thought influence perception, or does perception influence it, and so forth. And the fact that you talk in a certain way, does that give rise to certain kinds of thoughts? Why were the Egyptians particularly good, it seems, at anatomy and that kind of stuff? Why were the Greeks particularly good at philosophy? For one thing, Greek certainly seems to have a language, grammatically, that's better suited to certain things in philosophy than Latin. And Romans knew this. Cicero knew this. Cicero invented some words in Latin to help increase the philosophical vocabulary. They doesn't have the words. And certainly the lack of a definite article is a problem. So I think, how you say things certainly affects how you think, yeah.
Well, if you do that, then what language do deaf people think in?
Well, and that's the question, right?
'Cause
That's
it's
the
like-
question.
then if that's so, then do they think at all really?
And
Or do they
what
think-
is it?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm
Well,
saying, but
and-
it's
and
like
what about
if you.
infants? What about babies?
Yeah.
Presumably babies are thinking, but they don't have words yet.
All the language.
There's something,
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
you could argue, did the Greeks being better at philosophy influence the language first?
Right, which influenced which, is a good question. There's a wonderful episode of Star Trek, and I don't know if you TOK people have watched it. If you had Miss McNew, did anybody of you have Miss McNew?
Mark
TOK? Did you watch that episode of Star Trek called Darmok?
We watched it.
We watched it.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
It's Star Trek: The Next Generation, if you know that series. Captain Picard gets transferred to this planet, and he's talking with this alien who seemingly speaks English, but it's not anything that Picard can understand. The guy speaks only in metaphor, literary metaphors from his culture. So for me to walk up to you and go, Hector and Achilles at Troy. And I mean that to indicate that there's some kind of conflict going on or something, you know. Achilles and Hector around the walls. You know, somebody's coming to get me, right? Because there's Achilles chasing Hector. And so poor Picard has no idea, because he's drawing on literary references from his culture, and Picard doesn't know. Well, they finally work out some stuff, and they begin to decide some things together. My question to the TOK class when we used to watch it, could a culture whose language was entirely metaphorical like that have built a starship with warp drive? It seems to me that there would be a technical vocabulary necessary for building, ye olde warp drive that's not capable in a wholly metaphoric language like that.
well,
Unless you kept building off metaphors.
And again, that just seems incredibly clumsy.
Well then,
Only,
you
only
find,
do so
incredibly
much with
clumsy.
metaphors of the past. I
Yeah.
mean, you
Because it's the past and
it'd
they
be really
have
hard to
favorites.
invent new things in metaphorical language.
Right.
because-
You have to then do something and then call that like.
Right, yes, yes,
But then that's
yes,
all perspective.
yes.
We didn't work with that.
So,
So was that in?
Mr. Perkins, 40 minutes ago, by Christian and David. And you would know that that would be a sarcastic response from an adult to a teenager. Because I gave them a sarcastic response when they were just totally ridiculing me about 40 minutes ago. So, yeah, right, so
You
like
know
we
we
have
love you.
to do it in order to, yeah, I don't know, Adrian.
Well, it kind of put it in my mind. Do you think that, because some of the things, like, there are things out there that we can't build. Like, do you think maybe we can't build it because we're not speaking the right language? That we might have to speak a different language and be able to formulate words
Well,
in
if
a way
you've
to
ever
make
seen, and I'll be honest, I only started to read the book, I never read the book, but I've seen the movie many times, the movie Contact. If you remember that movie where alien life is first made contact with the United States, or with the world. And it's a Carl Sagan novel, he was an actual scientist. At least in the movie version, there are pages and hundreds of pages of technical schemata that have been downloaded to us through sound. Well, we can't figure them out at all. We're trying to put them together and so forth. And somebody figures out, don't try to assemble them on a two-dimensional plane. Try to assemble them on a cube. Well, suddenly the pages all fit together and they make sense. So perhaps you're right, because we don't have the language to think of
Yeah, I'm
X, we
following,
can't
I'm following,
invent
yeah, I'm
X.
following.
Yeah, yes.
We watched a video in, about, it was a Carl Sagan video about
Mm.
the fourth dimension and about how
Right.
we don't have the ability to think in certain ways.
Exactly. Which I'm sure we've talked about that before, the geometrical shape called the hypercube.
You should draw a hypercube again.
Exactly, which is a four-dimensional object that's been unfolded into three-dimensional space.
People
So
have
we can
this-
imagine, we can absolutely visualize this three-dimensional unfolded object. We know what it is, because we're three-dimensional people. But we cannot possibly, even in our minds, fold this thing back up again into its four-dimensional
So what's the fourth dimension?
actual shape. Well, there's a
So it's
fourth
like
dimension of
smell.
time, but we're talking about a fourth
You need to
spatial
watch the video.
dimension. If there were a fourth spatial dimension.
I watched Cosmos, that's
Which is a great show. And a lot of people have indicated a 10 or 11 dimensional universe that something like 7 of the dimensions immediately at the point of the Big Bang immediately collapsed into a string, was part of string theory. The 7 dimensions have collapsed into a string where the other 3 dimensions have expanded, which are the dimensions that we live in. And one theory is that at some point those dimensions will themselves start to collapse because stuff can't expand forever. So the 3 spatial dimensions we have will start to collapse, and that the 4 that are currently at a string will begin to expand. And possibly we could avoid a horrible cataclysm of the entire universe going higgly-piggledy if we could somehow manage to switch over from the 3 into the expanding 4. Of course, it's all hypothetical. So forth. So, you know, we can think about some things, but, and then I was asking, and obviously, you know, we're not doing what we're going to do today. This is the
Which
longest
is-
2 now in history.
We only have 3 minutes.
Right. And you understand, right? No teacher ever gets off on a topic unless he wants to.
Yeah, that's why the whole class period.
I was in here, Rachel came in taking makeup, I'm over here reading. I swear these articles on the stupid Helen part keep multiplying like rabbits. Every single article has another footnote. I mean, I've outrun the binder. Now I've got other articles I'm just shoving in, but they won't even fit in the rings of the binder. And I'm highlighting and going crazy. So I'm reading an article and highlighting while she's taking her quiz, and there were parts where I'm talking out loud to the article, or really to the author. And certainly private reading is pleasurable, but honestly, I think it's engagement. I don't know that you can read. I don't know that you can read this in private.
Yeah, no.
You know, the ability to discuss it in a class. Well, that's why so many people have reading groups. I think that's why adults have reading groups, because, you know, we're not in college anymore, but you still want that experience. You know, you want to talk back to the author. You want to talk with other people to share it. And I think it's, I was sitting here thinking about, you know,